What's up, everybody? Yeah, I had to take a shave. I look totally different. But anyway, um, my area, in my area where I live, we had that major storm come through a couple of days ago, and we still have no power. Only certain sections of the county have power. My city is like spotty. Some places have power, some don't. Unfortunately, my area doesn't. So, depending on how soon they can get the power on, I have no internet. I'll be doing a few videos from the comfort of my vehicle. So, um, where were we? Ah, yeah. When the power went out, I was in the process of recording a segment on ancient Egypt. I got halfway through, the power went out, so then I just erased the whole thing. Let's see. Ramses. Not the first Ramses. Ramses the Great, I believe it is. That's who we were talking about. He had the one wife, Nefetari, and he was a military man, if I remember correctly. He had a side chick from a different locale. He got him a side chick that he ended up marrying. And then years later, he got him another side chick from that same region. And I don't know. The great wife. I don't see how she wasn't bothered by this guy having so many wives and then getting them pregnant. You couldn't do that today. If your woman found out you got a side chick, oh my goodness, it's gonna be some problems. It definitely is gonna be some problems. But back then, people just did things differently. There was a lot of death, early death. So what do you expect? You have one wife, you hoping that all your kids survive, and then they don't. So then somebody comes up with the idea that maybe if you have two wives, then you double your chances of having the heir to the throne. Not bad. And I have to admit, I like the fact that these weren't just your average side chicks. These were, so to speak, lesser wives. That was a motorcycle. These were lesser wives. You had the great wife, which is the first wife, and then you had the other wives. So in a lot of cultures, and let me add, some cultures today still observe having more than one wife. Now, in the Western world, they call it polygamy. What is it, polygamy? When you have more than one wife? Somebody look that up, but I'm pretty sure that's what it's called. Either way, what happens is that a lot of kids end up dying early. Some of them never make it to a full term. So if you have 3 or 4 wives, hopefully one or two of them kids will make it. Like I said, in the Western world, they frown upon that. You cannot have. We're taught that it's not right to have more than one wife. You know, but my thing is this: as I read this audiobook, as I listen to this audiobook, I'm learning that a lot of things that's frowned upon now were the standard back in the day. Like, okay, you got some people, religious groups that observe having more than one woman. You have a lot of people, dare I say it, in the black community, some in some whites too, but you have a lot of men who have side chicks. And this has been, as far as I can remember, this has been going on for generations. You know, you hear about these high profile job men that's messing around with the secretary. And on the low end, you got these wannabe family men, and they got a side chick. Or the one guy that's got the nice looking chick, she's, you know, going to college and all this good stuff. But his real girlfriend, we ain't gonna speak on her. That's his boo right there. But anyway, they say something happened to him that kind of softened him up. As a result of what happened, I don't know. Did he take on more wives? Did he take less wives? I don't know. But let's see. Turn this back on. Like I said, y'all, my power is out, so I'll be doing a lot of videos from my car. Get this thing adjusted. But
the other is, we have an awful lot of information about him, so we can know something about him. He gets to become a human being.
Okay.
He lived for 67 years. So
that's a long time.
Time to build up a kind of dossier, a resume. And last time we talked about the early years. And the two things I stressed was, one, Ramses as a warrior. That, remember the Battle of Kadesh in year 5? He marches out and fights the Hittites at Kadesh. He doesn't win, but he certainly distinguishes himself. He holds off the troops by himself, he says. And eventually at the end, he was offered a peace treaty, and he refuses it. He's only willing to take a truce because he's going to be back. So Ramses is a warrior, there's no question about it, at least in his early years. Then I also tried to show Ramses as a builder. Remember, he built the incredible temple at Abu Simbel with those 67-foot high statues of Ramses himself. It was a great piece of propaganda, so that anybody coming north from Nubia would have to go right by it, and you see these statues of Ramses. And then if you got off the boat and you went inside the temple, what do you see? Nubians as bound captives. Pretty impressive stuff. But that was Ramses in the early years. I want to talk about the later years today. There's a bit of a mystery about Ramses. After this incredible start, really kind of an aggressive start, you know, gonna build, gonna fight, Ramses has what we might call today a midlife crisis. His personality changes radically. He becomes more sedentary, and we're not exactly sure why. But today I want to trace the latter years of my man Ramses the Great. And I also want to show you how when you rule for 67 years and you're a powerful pharaoh, what kind of resources are available to you to build your tomb in the Valley of the Kings? You see, we're all familiar with Tutankhamun's tomb, because that had all the goodies stuffed in it. But Tutankhamun was a relatively minor king, ruling for only 10 years. What about Ramses, who's Ramses the Great and rules for 67 years? So we'll talk about how a pharaoh with real resources can prepare for the next life. But let's start with Ramses as a warrior. Now, Kadesh is behind him. He's distinguished himself at the Battle of Kadesh. He has carved it on temple walls. Everybody knows he's a great warrior. But he marches out again. In year 8, he marches out to Syria again. Once again, he's going to Syria, a long haul. And he does pretty well. I mean, it's successful, but he doesn't conquer Kadesh.
Mm.
You know, he comes back, but he hasn't conquered Kadesh, which is an interesting thing. Now, the reason he had to march out again, and the Egyptians marched out again and again and again, was that, remember, they never had an occupying force. When they conquered a country, they didn't leave, say, a garrison of 2,000 soldiers to make sure these people stayed in line and paid their taxes or whatever. No, Egyptians never wanted to live on foreign soil, because if they died on foreign soil, they might not be mummified, and they'd lose their chance at immortality. So, because they never left a kind of colony in any country, they had to go back every year if they wanted the tribute. And that's what happens. Ramses marches out again and again. But year 8, goes to Syria, does okay, but doesn't capture Kadesh.
Mm.
Now, in year 21 of Ramses' reign, he's been reigning for 21 years now, right? He's in his 40s, right? Just about in his 40s. He signs a treaty with the Hittite king. He signs the Hittite treaty. Now remember, at Kadesh he wasn't willing to sign a treaty, right? It's, nope, maybe a temporary truce. And the treaty is an interesting document. The Hittites really needed it. They needed this treaty. They were fighting the Assyrians, and they couldn't really battle Assyrians and Egyptians at the same time. So it's understandable from the Hittite point of view, we need a treaty. But this is just the very time when Ramses, you might think, would march out and defeat the Hittites. They've divided their forces. They're going to fight the Assyrians. They're going to fight us. But no, Ramses accepts it. For some reason, in the 21st year of Ramses' reign, this great warrior says, no more war. It's a very interesting document, by the way. We don't have the original version of it that the Hittites sent, but the Egyptians were pretty impressed with it. It came on a silver tablet, right? It was a silver tablet inscribed in cuneiform. Now, cuneiform is not a language, it's a script. In other words, all cuneiform means is wedge-shaped writing. So it was usually made with a stylus. You had a little triangular stylus, you impressed it on something, usually clay, and that's cuneiform. But you could write many languages in the script. In the same way, we use the exact same letters for French, Spanish, English, right? A T still looks like a T. It's the same with cuneiform. You could use cuneiform for lots of different languages. So the people who lived in the city of Akkad, they wrote in Akkadian. The Sumerians who lived in Sumer wrote in Sumerian. But they all used the same letters, the cuneiform script. So this tablet, the silver tablet, comes to Ramses the Great. And the Egyptians, when they wrote their translation of it, and Ramses put it on temple walls. It's on the wall at Abu Simbel, his temple that he built with the huge statues. It's on the wall at Karnak Temple, the Vatican of ancient Egypt. So he has several versions of this thing that he translated. And one of the things
The Vatican before the Vatican.
It came on a silver tablet with seals and stuff. So they were kind of impressed with just the way it looked. It looked like a different kind of document for them.
Yeah.
Now, it has everything that you would expect from a superpower.
Oops, sorry about that.
Making an agreement. It's got
Hot.
non-aggression pact, you know. I'm not going to go on your territory, you don't go on mine. It's got mutual support clauses. If I'm attacked, you'll help me. If you're attacked, I'll help you. It's got even trade agreements. It's the kind of, I think, it's probably the first peace treaty in the history of the world that we have. It's a real document. Just to give you a feeling for it, I'll read you one little part of it, and you'll get a feeling for how these guys talked about, let's make peace. Now, remember the Hittites, the land of the Hittites was called Hatti. That's where we get Hittites from.
Hatti.
The great ruler of Hatti shall never trespass against the land of Egypt to take anything from it. Ramses shall never trespass against the land of Hatti to take anything from it. If some other foe should come against the territories of Ramses, and he sends word to the great ruler of Hatti, saying, come with me as an ally against him, then the great ruler of Hatti shall act with him, and shall slay his foes. And so shall Ramses for Hattusil, that's the king. As for him who shall keep these terms, on this silver tablet, Hittites or Egyptians, the thousands of gods of Hatti and the thousands of gods of Egypt will cause him to flourish, will make him to live, together with his household, with land and his servants. So if you follow this treaty, be you a noble or the king, you're going to prosper. So it's an important document. And I think, in a sense, it marks a turning for Ramses' career. he's not ready to do battle anymore. He's turned from a hawk to a dove, essentially. And you might wonder why. It's quite interesting. Now, the next sign that Ramses has really changed, kind of mellowed in his old age, comes in year 34. Now, he's in his 50s now, right? And Ramses marries a Hittite bride.
Wow.
Right? A Hittite, I mean, these guys were the enemies up until the treaty. Now he's marrying a Hittite bride. This is usually done not out of love. He undoubtedly never saw her when he made the deal. This is 800 miles to the north in modern Turkey, and he's there. But
Turkey!
It's a deal. It sort of puts the two countries on a kind of equal footing, and he's going to marry a Hittite bride. And he talks about her dowry, right? Now, Ramses kind of has to boast no matter what happens. So, for example, if he's going to sign a treaty...
Side note, I did a DNA test for, what was that, National Geographics? And on my father's side of my DNA, there's a small region called Asia Minor, and part of that region is what's known today as Turkey. And I'm like, so just because my skin is brown, is dark, am I really black or am I something else? I mean, culturally I'm black. But you have a lot of people that are dark-skinned that culturally they don't identify with black Americans, you know. You call them black and they're like, no, I'm not black. I am not black. Just because my skin is dark, I'm not black. So, you know, you got dark-skinned Cubans, Puerto Ricans, Mexicans, Dominican Republicans, pretty sure Haitians, Jamaicans. It's a whole lot of them. So, I don't know. I'm curious. But that's a discussion for another day. But every time I listen to a program like this and they say Turkey, I'm always wondering just how far back does my heritage, well, I can't really say heritage, but how far back does my DNA go on my father's side? I mean, were they noblemen? Were they, I can't think of the name of it. But were they royal family? I don't know. I don't really know my father's side. My mother's side, for the most part, but you go so far back and it gets dicey. Anyway.
It's out of his magnanimous gesture that he's letting this poor guy from the Hittites sign a treaty with him. Same with his bride, the Hittite bride. He says her dowry will be greater than the king of Babylon's daughter. Right? This is big time. And it was a big dowry, undoubtedly. I mean, Egypt was the power in the Middle East.
Shade?
So when this young girl, probably, right, she's got to be a beauty or else it's not going to be sent. When this young girl comes to Ramses,
beauty is an eye beholder.
With gold and silver and horses and jewels. I mean, she's coming with stuff. And it's a long haul. It's 800 miles, roughly. So she is coming with an entourage. This is going to be an armed guard. This is a major event. A Hittite princess coming to marry Ramses the Great. And you know, one of the things that you got out of a deal like this was things that you didn't have. For example, Egypt did not have precious stones. That's a common misconception. There is not a single precious stone in Egypt. There are no diamond, ruby, emerald mines at all. But not only that, there were certain kinds of semi-precious stones that Egypt didn't have. For example, lapis. And these guys could come with lapis. So a marriage like this was a source of things not easily acquired, a source of the luxuries that makes life worth living. So Ramses was pretty happy about this deal, we can be sure. And he even carved an inscription on his temple about this marriage. And you know what amazed everybody the most? He describes the the bride coming, and he's pleased with her. She is more beautiful than anything. This is just kind of stock stuff. You had to say it, to show that Ramses was really getting a good deal. Remember, he always had his favorite wife, Nefetari. I mean, she was really the apple of his eye. I mean, if you'll remember, over the temple at Abu Simbel, he said, Nefetari, she for whom the sun doth shine. I mean, Nefetari was really his sweetie. But, so and she's not bothered by this young princess coming. She's not bothered. This is a political marriage. But he had to say she was beautiful, etc. But the thing that really amazed them all, and he wrote it on the temple wall, it says, Hittite soldiers and Egyptian soldiers sat down to eat, face to face, not fighting. I mean, it was amazing that, apparently all the soldiers were amazed at this, that, for years, the Hittites had been the traditional enemies. And here you are, the princess has come, and obviously with a small army to guard her. And now that this Hittite army is banqueting with the Egyptian army. Face to face, not fighting, was the phrase. And it was incredible. See, Egypt had 9 traditional enemies. They were called the 9 bows.
Oh, wow.
And, the Hittites were one of them. And I'll say something neat when you go to a museum. If you look at a statue of a king of this period, the New Kingdom as we call it, and if the statue is one seated, a seated statue where the king or queen is seated, look beneath the feet. Usually what you see beneath the feet of the statue are 9 bows. In other words, the pharaoh is seated, stepping on the enemy. It's a kind of symbolic gesture. But when you go to a museum in the Egyptian collection, look at the feet, and you'll very often see 9 bows. It's not clear what they are, but now that you know, you'll see, oh yeah, they're bows from bow and arrow. So this is a big deal for the Hittite army, to be eating with the Egyptian army and they're not slugging it out. It was a big deal. There's another indication, by the way, that this Ramses is softening, at least certainly to the Hittites, and he doesn't march out against anyone else either. The king of the Hittites sends a letter to Ramses. Hattusilus is the king's name. Now remember, Ramses is going to reign for 67 years. That is a long haul. So he's going to outlive an awful lot of Hittite kings, Syrian kings. He's going to outlive everybody. So the new king writes him and says, my sister can't have children, can't conceive. Will you send me an Egyptian physician to see if he can help with this problem? Now again, Egypt, of course, was viewed as having the best of all physicians. You remember in Egypt, medicine was called the necessary art. And they were, as far as I know, the first to have specialists. For example, they had eye doctors. They had gynecologists. Men who specialized in women's diseases. And they were usually men who were physicians. We know of one woman physician, an interesting woman, I think her name is Peshat. She was in the Old Kingdom during the time of Snefer, way back when, in the Old Kingdom, and she was the royal physician. So in the early part, there was a woman who was the royal physician, but almost always the physicians are men. So because Egypt has these specialists, right, gynecologists, perhaps this man can help the sister conceive. So just the fact that the Hittite king is writing to Ramses and saying, hey, old boy, send me a physician. Ramses' reply is great. I mean, he is funny. He says, basically he says, I know your sister. She's 50 if she's a day. But I'll send a physician anyway, right? It is also interesting that since the woman can't...
Wait a minute. That's funny. That's funny. Some people might not get the joke from that, but that's hilarious. He's like, hey, I know your sister. How do you know my sister? They didn't get that deep with it, but it's like, okay, your sister can't conceive. Your sister is 50 years old. Maybe that's why she can't conceive, because in those days, majority of the children died. So you have to have a lot of wives to ensure that you had children. The fact that she's 50 years old, come on now. They never mention if she had, well, so far they haven't mentioned if this sister had other kids. They just said she's 50 years old. Hey, I know your sister. She's 50. In today's world, the average 50-year-old woman is not trying to have kids, even if it was physically possible. Nobody's trying to do the Sarah. Nope. God's not coming to 50-year-old women saying, hey, you're going to have a child. No. 50 years old? That'd be like your grandmother having a kid. Like you grown and you finding out your 50-year-old grandma is having a kid? Like what? Just ain't right, man. It just ain't right. If she's 50 years old, she needs to hang it up. You know. Not to mention, unless you are a very health conscious person, being 50 years old and pregnant, especially in ancient Egypt, that's gonna cause some difficulties. That's gonna cause some problems. Like I said, in today's time, 50-year-old trying to have a baby. I mean, there's a lot of men that can knock it out of the ballpark. They, 50 years old, hey. But those men are usually having kids with younger women, 40-year women, 30-year women. They're not having kids by women that are the same age as them. So there's a big difference in the social, what I want to say. There's a big difference in how they did things back then as compared to how we do things now.
See, the assumption, of course, is that it's her fault. That the reason they're not having children is the woman's problem, right? You don't know exactly what they really thought about conception. How did it happen? It was a relatively mysterious occurrence. Even until the Middle Ages, in our time, our Middle Ages, conception wasn't really fully understood. I mean, that's why midwives were sometimes looked, it was the kind of thing that women did. You had midwives, and it was a woman's thing, and midwives weren't that well educated very often. So conception is a curious thing. So it wasn't until, and I think that's probably where you get witches becoming more important than warlocks or whatever the male counterpart is, because women did these cunning things having to do with birth and stuff like that, and they had their own realms. They were a little looked at suspiciously, but this physician is going to be sent and he'll do what he can do. We have no idea what happens. Undoubtedly, nothing, but the physician is sent. So Ramsey's this mellow Hittite king is kind of very happy with him. They're getting along. And in year 44 or so of Ramsey's reign, Ramses is now in his 60s, but think about it. He's been ruling for 44 years. He's got another 23 years to go or so. I mean, he's going to keep going. Anyway, in year 44, he marries another Hittite bride. Takes another one. I think this further establishes peace. What we're getting is, this is so established that these two countries are at peace with each other. Two Hittite brides, sending physicians, treaties on the temple walls. I mean, think about it. You carved a treaty on a temple wall. It was up there forever. It wasn't like a piece of paper. You could put it away and forget about it. So I think Ramses is mellowing. And it may not be just old age, because it started fairly early. Now, let me say some things about Ramses' personal life, not just his political aspirations or lack of. Ramses experienced a lot of deaths in his family, which is, understand this, he had about 100 children. Right? Naturally, he had more than one wife. He had two great, he had Nefetari, had another great important wife, he's Notref, loads of wives. Had something like 52 sons. And if you have that many children, in an ancient country where death is not unusual at an early age, you're going to experience a death probably every year. One of your kids, one of your wives is going to die, right? And Ramses had a lot of personal tragedy. I mean, you can't think about it, oh, he's got 100 kids, so it doesn't matter. Certainly there are people who care, people who matter to Ramses. And he's experiencing them. And I think the big one happens around year 20 of his reign. His beloved Nefetari dies. She dies just about the time that they make their trip to Abu Simbel to dedicate the temples. Now remember, at Abu Simbel, which is south of Egypt's border at Aswan, Ramses built not one temple, but two. One is his great temple, where he's shown the 4 statues, the 67-foot height statues. But as you're facing it from the water, to the right is Nefertari's temple. He built an entire huge temple carved out of the mountain for Nefertari, where he puts this wonderful inscription, "She for whom the sun doth shine." Well, they complete the temple about Ramses' 20th year. And Nefertari makes the trip down, and we never hear about her again, which means she died. You don't get like a formal announcement, the queen is dead, the king is dead. You never do that. Or the prince is dead. That never happens. In a sense, it was viewed as darkness triumphing over light, in a sense. So you didn't really talk about it. The way we figure out when somebody dies is when they disappear from the historical record. And after year 20, there's no more Nefertari. So that's a big blow to Ramses, undoubtedly. It's interesting, by the way, that right after her death, he signs the Hittite Treaty. Right? She dies in year 20, and the Hittite Treaty is signed about year 21. So there may be a connection between the two events. It may have taken some steam out of his sails, maybe. I'll tell you a funny thing about Abu Simbel, by the way, because that's a source of our information about Ramses. Now, I can't prove this. I'm just sort of just saying it off the top of my head. But my bet is that Mount Rushmore was patterned after Abu Simbel. That you've got these colossal heads of our rulers carved into a mountain. I would bet that Mount Rushmore, really, the inspiration for it, comes from Abu Simbel. Interestingly, by the way, it took the same number of years, roughly, to complete the two monuments, Abu Simbel and Mount Rushmore. So there's a difference, and it's not, to be fair, Mount Rushmore is like granite, and this is a softer stone in Egypt. But to be fair, also, we had pneumatic tools, we had drills and things like that. But I think Mount Rushmore may have been inspired by Ramses the Great. Great men have the great monuments. But Nefertari is not the only one to die during Ramses' reign, of course. Remember Ramses' firstborn son, Amun-Her-Kepshef was his name? And the name means, Amun is upon my sword. A Kepshef is...
Oh, wow. Okay, well, the one point I wanted to make was that I agree with that notion that the headstones at Mount Rushmore were inspired by Egypt. I'm not just gonna say Ramsey. Yeah, directly it was inspired by Ramsey. But there are so many things that we consider to be American that have been, I can't say borrowed, because when you borrow something, you usually let people know where you got it from. But these are things that racist America decided, oh, we thought this up ourselves. As long as we keep the black people from reading and writing, they'll never know that we stole it from their ancestors. Tennessee, the city of Memphis. Memphis was a capital in Egypt. Ramses the Great, he made these larger-than-life monuments to himself, to his wife. And what do us Americans do? Well, what did America do? Everything that was great about Egypt, they took it. They took the jewelry, they took the the coffins. They took everything. They even took names. Not only did they take names, some of the names were switched by the Greeks. They took them too. Most of your colleges, your universities, they have Greek sororities. Don't have Egyptian sororities. They have Greek sororities. But most of the great philosophers of that time, they all wanted to go and learn from Egypt. But Egypt rarely gets any credit. The name Egypt itself is Greek. The actual name was Kemet. But back to what I was saying about the stones, is that, yeah, they were inspired by, excuse me, they were inspired by Egypt, by Ramses. They went there, they saw all the majesty of Egypt, and they wanted to model America after Egypt, because there was nothing in America. It really wasn't. Even during the modern age of mankind, of civilization in America, when you knew that Egypt was occupied by black people, when you knew that black people had been enslaved by white people, they still did not do anything to rectify the situation. But for their own people, oh, we can make money off of this, we can make money off of that. Oh, let's put up a great monument of all our presidents, like Egypt did, like Ramses did. Okay, that's fine if you want to do that. But when people ask you, where did you get the inspiration from, don't say it was the American president. He didn't have nothing to do with it. All that came from Egypt. It came from Africa. And on that note, be safe. I'll chat with you later.